Hello, hello. Welcome to Storytime with Moog. I am Moog. And today we are reading Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, starting with part 4, chapter 10. But first, reading updates. I finished a book today. I didn't start it today, but I finished it today, and that is Artificial Condition. All thoughts left my brain for a second. Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. It is part of a series. It's number 2, so I didn't start a new series. I'm continuing the series, and it's part of the Murderbot Diaries. The books are super, super small. This one was 150 something pages, but the book itself is also physically smaller, so it just reads really fast, and it is episodic in that like this is the adventure of the book type of a thing, but also there is this overarching through line of adventure that Murderbot is on. Um Basically, what Murderbot is a security unit, so it is a artificial intelligent robot that kind of looks like a human, to like make people feel more comfortable around it, but they are programmed to protect. And so they go on a lot of like really deep space missions with crews, and I'm trying to like be vague and not give anything away. Um yeah, and there's this past. So there is this point where Murderbot does not remember anything that happened at a certain point because the memory was completely wiped from all of the logs. So that is like the overall thing that Murderbot's trying to figure out is like what happened? Is it my fault? Did somebody make me do this? Like this type of thing. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. And also it's kind of like a really nice breath of fresh air because it is so short. It helps with like reading numbers if you have a quantitative goal. Um, and it just makes you feel accomplished. Like, I read a whole book in like 2 days. And you can definitely read it in one sitting if that's like your jam. If you have time to do that, you can absolutely do it. It goes really fast. And in both of them, there is action, but it's not like overwhelmingly action packed, if that makes sense. It is like, okay, we're on this mission. Oh no, something went wrong. And then we're back. That sort of thing. Let's see. Anything else? I don't think so. I don't remember if I said this, but I did finish Batman Year One. Really, really liked it. Really, really good. I loved the feel of it, the vibes, the art is done beautifully, and I just really enjoyed that you get multiple perspectives. You're not just following Bruce Wayne, as Bruce Wayne and as Batman, but you're also getting Gordon, who's not commissioner yet. He's new in Gotham. He's the new kid, and you also get Catwoman, who it's kind of like her origin story as well, which is different than like the like mainstreamy movies that people think of. But really, really enjoyed it. That was a fun one, and I think that's it. Yeah, it also reads really fast, which is nice. Yeah. So yes, today we are reading Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, starting with part 4, chapter 10. And last time what happened, Vronsky, who is mistressing with Anna Karenina, goes to Anna Karenina's house, which is like the one rule that Anna's husband has said is like a big no-no. And of course, Vronsky and Alexei, the husband, meet each other, and yeah. And so Alexei is obviously really mad. He tells Anna this, and he's like, all right, I'm leaving. I don't know. I'm never coming back. Like, I'm not going to come back to this house, and you'll hear from me when I've decided. something. And so he goes and he sees a lawyer and he's talking to a lawyer about the like actual steps and the actual processes of getting a divorce, like what that would mean for him and what that would mean for Anna and how that would be viewed in society and like all of these other things. So he's trying to get details for that. The lawyer is very like lawyery in that like his answers are kind of slippery and not like super transparent and things like that. Like the lawyer is trying to get information without giving any information because he knows who Alexei is and he knows his position in society as well as in the military. Vronsky, oh, we already talked about Vronsky, but he's also having like second thoughts of being like, ooh, maybe I did an oopsie doodle. mm, let's see. Levin is now in the city. Oh, we have Oblonsky is back. Oblonsky, who is also Stepan Arkadyevich, and he is back bopping around, and he has talked to Levin, he's talked to Alexei, and he's told Alexei, like, hey, talk to my wife before you do anything rash. Like, because he knows that he's having issues in his marriage, and he's like, please, just talk to my wife. Because Stepan cheated on his wife, and they are still together. And they have way more children than Anna and Alexei. So there's this big dinner party that Stepan is putting together, and Alexei is there. Levin and Kitty end up sitting next to each other, and this is the first time that they've seen each other since she denied his proposal. Even though Levin saw her like passing by in a carriage, he just refused to go see her and refused to go talk to her. What else? What else? What else? I think that might be it. I think that might be it. All right. Part 4, Chapter 10. Pestsov liked thrashing an argument out to the end, and was not satisfied with Sergei Ivanovitch's words, especially as he felt the injustice of his view. I did not mean, he said over the soup, addressing Alexei Alexandrovitch, mere density of population alone, but in conjunction with fundamental ideas, and not by means of principle. It seems to me, Alexey Alexandrovitch said languidly and with no haste, that that's the same thing. In my opinion, influence over another people is only possible to the people which has the higher development, which... But that's just the question, Pestov broke in his bass. He was always in a hurry to speak, and seemed always to put his whole soul into what he was saying. In what are we to make higher developments consist? In English, the French, the German, which is at the highest stage of development. Which of them will rationalize the other? We see the Rhine provinces have been turned French, but the Germans are not at a lower stage, he shouted. There is another law at work here. I fancy that the greater influence is always on the side of true civilization, said Alexey Alexandrovitch, slightly lifting his eyebrows. But what are we to lay down as the outward signs of true civilization? Said Pestsov. Well, I imagine such signs are generally very well known, said Alexey Alexandrovitch. But are they fully known? Sergei Ivanovitch put in with a subtle smile. It is the accepted view now that real culture must be purely classical, but we see most intense disputes on each side of the question, and there is no denying that the opposite camp has strong points in its favor. You are for classics, Sergei Ivanovitch. Will you take red wine? Said Stepan Arkadyevitch. I am not expressing my own opinion of either form of culture, Sergei Ivanovitch said, holding out his glass with a smile of condescension, as to a child. I only say that both sides have strong arguments to support them, he went on, addressing Alexey Alexandrovitch. My sympathies are classical from education, but in this discussion I am personally unable to arrive at a conclusion. I see no distinct grounds for classical studies being given a preeminence over scientific studies. The natural sciences have just as great an educational value, put in Pestov's. Take astronomy, take botany, or zoology with its system of general principles. Hmm, I cannot quite agree with that, responded Alexey Alexandrovitch. It seems to me that one must admit that the very process of studying the forms of language has a peculiarly favorable influence on intellectual development. Moreover, it cannot be denied that the influence of the classical authors is in the highest degree moral, while, unfortunate, with the study of the natural sciences are associated the false and noxious doctrines which are the curse of our day. Sergei Ivanovitch would have said something, but Pestov interrupted him in his rich bass. He began warmly contesting the justice of this view. Sergei Ivanovitch waited serenely to speak, obviously with a convincing reply ready. "But," said Sergei Ivanovitch, smiling subtly and addressing Karenin, "one must allow that to weigh all the advantages and disadvantages of classical and scientific studies is a difficult task, and the question which form of education was to be preferred would not have been so quickly and conclusively decided if there had not been in favor of classical education, as you expressed it just now, its moral discernement, anti-nihilist influence." "Undoubtedly." "If it had not been for the distinctive property of anti-nihilistic influence on the side of classical studies, we should have considered the subject more, have weighed the arguments on both sides," said Sergei Ivanovitch, with a subtle smile. "We should have given elbow-room to both tendencies, but now we know that these little pills of classical learning possesses the medicinal properties of anti-nihilism, and we boldly prescribe them to our patients. But what if they had no such medicinal properties?" he wound up humorously. Stepan Arkadyevitch had not made a mistake in inviting Pestsov. With Pestsov, intellectual conversation never flagged for an instant. Directly Sergei Ivanovitch had concluded the conversation with his jest, Pestsov promptly started a new one. "I can't agree even," said he, "that the government had that aim. The government obviously is guided by abstract considerations and remains indifferent to the influence its measures may exercise. The education of women, for instance, would naturally be regarded as likely to be harmful, but the government opens schools and universities for women." And the conversation at once passed to the new subject of the education of women. Alexey Alexandrovitch expressed the idea that the education of women is apt to be confounded with the emancipation of women, and that it is only so that it can be considered dangerous. "I consider, on the contrary, that the two questions are inseparably connected together," said Pestsov. "It is a vicious circle. Woman is deprived of rights from lack of education, and the lack of education results from the absence of rights. We must forget that the subjection of women is so complete and dates from such ages back that we are often unwilling to recognize the gulf that separates them from us," said he. "Hmm. You said rights," said Sergei Ivanovitch, waiting till Pestsov had finished. "Meaning the right of sitting on juries, of voting, of presiding at official meetings, the right of entering the civil service, of sitting in parliament." "Undoubtedly." "But if women, as a rare exception, can occupy such positions, it seems to me you are wrong in using the expression rights. It would be more correct to say duties. Every man will agree that in doing the duty of a juryman, a witness, a telegraph clerk, we feel we are performing duties, and therefore it would be correct to say that women are seeking duties, and quite legitimately. And one can but sympathize with this desire to assist in the general labor of man." "Quite so. Alexei Alexandrovich assented. The question, I imagine, is simply whether they are fitted for such duties. They will most likely be perfectly fitted, said Stepan Arkadyevitch, when education has become general among them. We see this. How about the proverb? Said the prince, who had a long while been intent on the conversation, his little comical eyes twinkling. I can say it before my daughter. Her hair is long, because her wit is just what they thought just what they thought of them before their emancipation, said Pestsov angrily. What seems strange to me is that women should seek fresh duties, said Sergei Ivanovitch, while we see, unhappily, that men usually try to avoid them. Duties are bound up with rights. Power, money, honor, those are what women are seeking, said Pestsov. Just as I thought, just as though I should seek the right to be a wet nurse and feel injured because women are paid for the work, while no one will take me, said the old prince. Turovtsin exploded in a loud roar of laughter, and Sergei Ivanovitch regretted that he had not made this comparison. Even Alexey Alexandrovitch smiled. Yes, but a man can't nurse a baby, said Pestsov, while a woman... No, there was an Englishman who did suckle his baby on board ship, said the old prince, feeling this freedom in conversation permissible before his own daughters. There are as many such Englishmen as there would be women officials, said Sergei Ivanovitch. Yes, but what is a girl to do who has no family? Put in Stepan Arkadyevitch, thinking of Masha Tishibushova, whom he had had in his mind all along, in sympathizing with Pestsov and supporting him. If the story of such a girl were thoroughly sifted, you would find she had abandoned a family, her own or a sister's, where she might have found a woman's duties, Darya Alexandrovna broke in unexpectedly in a tone of exasperation, probably suspecting what sort of girl Stepan Arkadyevitch was thinking of. But we take our stand on principle as the ideal, replied Pestsov in his mellow bass. Women desires have to have rights, to be independent, educated. She is oppressed, humiliated by the consciousness of her disabilities. And I'm oppressed and humiliated that they won't engage me at a foundling, the old prince said again, to the huge delight of Turovtsin, who, in his mirth, dropped his asparagus with the thick end in the sauce. End of chapter 10. Not the thick end in the sauce. Interesting. Okay, so we are getting some more politics, which is just, it's just a little break from everybody's dramatic, messy lives. So now we're getting politics, and it is revealing of both the time as well as the culture, and we're getting different sides to this argument about whether women should, can, could, would have rights as well as education. And we have the argument that both having rights and education are tied together, and that it is like a vicious cycle. Like, can they have rights without being educated? Is that the part that's holding them back? Or is education, like not having education, holding them back from having rights? I think I said the same thing twice, but vice versa. You know what I'm trying to say. And then we also have the prince who is like, they don't need more rights. They have womanly duties. Okay, Prince. And he feels, invigorated and okay enough to say this in front of his daughters, which, great. Um, and yeah, so we have like 4 or 5 people in this conversation. Some of them agreeing, some of them just like having little clips, others disagreeing very differently. And there is a line that is like, okay, but like this is the same thing that happened with the emancipation of other populations who have been, thwarted or seen as subservient. So, interesting, interesting. Part 4, Chapter 11. Everyone took part in the conversation except Kitty and Levin. At first, when they were talking of the influence that one people has on another, there rose to Levin's mind what he had said on the subject. But these ideas, once of such importance in his eyes, seemed to come into his brain as in a dream, and had now not the slightest interest for him. It even struck him as strange that they should be so eager to talk of what was of no use to anyone. Kitty, too, should, one would have supposed, have been interested in what they were saying of the rights and education of women. How often she had mused on the subject, thinking of her friend abroad, Varenka, of her painful state of dependence. How often she had wondered about herself what would become of her if she did not marry, and how often she had argued with her sister about it. But it did not interest her at all. She and Levin had a conversation of their own. Yet not a conversation, but some sort of mysterious communication, which brought them every moment nearer, and stirred in both a sense of glad terror before the unknown into which they were entering. At first, Levin, in answer to Kitty's question how he could have seen her last year in the carriage, told her how he had been coming home from the mowing along the high road and had met her. "It was very, very early in the morning. You were probably only just awake. Your mother was asleep in the corner. It was an exquisite morning. I was walking along, wondering who it could be, in a four in hand. It was a splendid set of 4 horses with bells, and in a second you flashed by, and I saw you at the window. You were sitting like this, holding the strings of your cap in both hands, and thinking awfully deeply about something," he said, smiling. "How I should like to know what you were thinking about then. Something important?" Wasn't I dreadfully untidy? She wondered, but seeing the smile of ecstasy these reminiscences called up, she felt that the impression she had made had been very good. She blushed and laughed with delight. "Really, I don't remember." "How nicely Turvson laughs," said Levin, admiring her moist eyes and shaking chest. "Have you known him long?" asked Kitty. "Oh, everyone knows him." "And I see you think he's a horrid man." "Not horrid, but nothing in him." "Oh, you're wrong, and you must give up thinking so directly," said Kitty. "I used to have a very poor opinion of him, too, but he's an awfully nice and wonderfully good-hearted man. He has a heart of gold." "How could you find out what sort of heart he has?" "We are great friends. I know him very well. Last year, soon after, you came to see us," she said with a guilty and at the same time confiding smile. "All Dolly's children had scarlet fever, and he happened to come and see her. And only fancy," she said in a whisper, "he felt so sorry for her that he stayed and began to help her look after her children. Yes, and for 3 weeks he stopped with them and looked after the children like a nurse. I am telling Konstantin Dmitrievitch about Turfskin in the scarlet fever," she said, bending over to her sister. "Oh, yes, it was wonderful, noble," said Dolly, glancing toward Turfson, who had become aware they were talking of him, and smiling gently to him. Levin glanced once more at Turfson, and wondered how it was he had not realized all this man's goodness before. "Oh, I'm sorry, and I'll never think ill of people again," he said, genuinely expressing what he felt at the moment. End of chapter 11. Interesting. Okay, so now we are at the same table at the same dinner party, but we've just like moved down the table a little bit, and so now we have Levin and Kitty, and they're continuing on a conversation, not commenting on the conversation that's happening on the other side of the table. And it's just like, oh, I just wonder what you were thinking when I saw you last, and going back and forth. And Turfson comes up into the conversation, and Kitty is like, oh no, like he's a great guy. You shouldn't think ill of him. Why, when Dolly was having issues, he came over and like helped take care of all of the kids, and it was so great. And he stayed there for like weeks. Okay, and this is where I'm like, is Dolly also having an affair? Is everybody just having affairs, or is he actually being like a good guy and just like actually helping these children? I don't know. I just assume that everybody's having an affair at this point. I just assume this. And then maybe that like that's why Dolly is okay, like has grown to be okay with Stepan having cheated. I don't know. I guess I guess we have to keep reading. The book is not over. I guess we have to just keep reading. It will probably tell us. Chapter 12. Connected with the conversation that had sprung up on the rights of women, there were certain questions as to the inequality of rights in marriage improper to discuss before the ladies. Pestsov had several times during dinner touched upon these questions, but Sergei Ivanovitch and Stepan Arkadyevitch carefully drew him off them. When they rose from the table and the ladies gone out, Pestsov did not follow them, but addressing Alexey Alexandrovitch began to expound the chief ground of inequality. The inequality in marriage, in his opinion, lay in the fact that the infidelity of the wife and the infidelity of the husband are punished unequally, both by the law and by public opinion. Stepan Arkadyevitch went hurriedly up to Alexey Alexandrovitch and offered him a cigar. "No, I don't smoke," Alexey Alexandrovitch answered calmly, and as though purposely wishing to show that he was not afraid of the subject, he turned to Pestsov with a chilly smile. "I imagine that such a view has a foundation in the very nature of things," he said, and would have gone on to the drawing room, but at this point Tursin broke suddenly and unexpectedly into the conversation, addressing Alexey Alexandrovitch. "You heard, perhaps, about Pryatchnikov?" said Turisfin, warmed up by the champagne he had drunk and long waiting for an opportunity to break the silence that had weighed on him. "Vasya Pryatchnikov?" he said, with a good-natured smile on his damp, red lips, addressing himself principally to the most important guest, Alexey Alexandrovitch. "They told me today he fought a duel with Kvitsy at Tver and has killed him. Just as it always seems that one bruises oneself on a sore place, so Stepan Arkadyevitch felt now that the conversation would by ill luck fall every moment on Alexey Alexandrovitch's sore spot. He would again have got his brother-in-law away, but Alexey Alexandrovitch himself inquired with curiosity, "What did Pryatchnikov fight about?" "Oh, his wife. Acted like a man, he did. Called him out and shot him." "Ah," said Alexey Alexandrovitch indifferently, and lifting his eyebrows, he went into the drawing-room. "How glad I am you have come," Dolly said with a frightened smile, meeting him in the outer drawing-room. "I must talk to you. Let's sit here." Alexey Alexandrovitch, with the same expression of indifference given him by his lifted eyebrows, sat down beside Darya Alexandrovna and smiled effectively. "It's fortunate," said he, "especially as I was meaning to ask you to excuse me and to be taking leave. I have to start tomorrow." Darya Alexandrovna was firmly convinced of Anna's innocence, and she felt herself growing pale, and her lips quivering with anger at this rigid, unfeeling man who was so calmly intending to ruin her innocent friend. "Alexey Alexandrovitch," she said, with desperate resolution, looking him in the face, "I asked you about Anna. You made me no answer. How is she?" She is, I believe, quite well, Darya Alexandrovna, replied Alexey Alexandrovitch, not looking at her. Alexey Alexandrovitch, forgive me. I have no right. But I love Anna as a sister and esteem her. I beseech you to tell me what is wrong between you. What fault do you find with her? Alexey Alexandrovitch frowned, and almost closing his eyes, dropped his head. I presume that your husband has told you the grounds on which I consider it necessary to change my attitude to Anna Arkadyevna, he said, not looking her in the face, but eyeing with displeasure Shtcherbatskoy, who was walking across the drawing-room. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I can't believe it, Dolly said, clasping her bony hands before her with a vigorous gesture. She rose quickly and laid her hand on Alexey Alexandrovitch's sleeve. Oh, we will be disturbed here. Come this way, please. Dolly's agitation had an effect on Alexey Alexandrovitch. He got up and submissively followed her to the schoolroom. They sat down to a table covered with an oilcloth cut in slits by penknives. I don't believe it, Dolly said, trying to catch his glance that avoided her. One cannot disbelieve facts, Darya Alexandrovna, said he, with an emphasis on the word facts. But what has she done? Said Darya Alexandrovna. What precisely has she done? She has forsaken her duty and deceived her husband. That's what she has done, said he. No, it can't be. No, for God's sake, you are mistaken, said Dolly, putting her hands to her temples and closing her eyes. Alexey Alexandrovitch smiled coldly, with his lips alone, meaning to signify to her and to himself the firmness of his conviction. But this warm defense, though it could not shake him, reopened his wound. He began to speak with greater heat. It is extremely difficult to be mistaken when a wife herself informs her husband of the fact, informs him that 8 years of her life and a son, all that's a mistake, and that she wants to begin life again, he said angrily, with a snort. Anna and sin, I cannot connect them. I cannot believe it. Darya Alexandrovna, he said, now looking straight into Dolly's kindly, troubled face and feeling that his tongue was being loosened in spite of himself. I would give a great deal for doubt to be still possible. When I doubted, I was miserable, but it was better than now. When I doubted, I had hope, but now there is no hope, and still I doubt of everything. I am in such doubt of everything that I even hate my son, and sometimes do not believe he is my son. I am very unhappy. He had no need to say that. Darya Alexandrovna had seen that as soon as he glanced into her face, and she felt sorry for him, and her faith in the innocence of her friend began to totter. Oh, this is awful. But can it be true that you are resolved on a divorce? I am resolved on extreme measures. There is nothing else for me to do. Nothing else to do. Nothing else to do? She replied with tears in her eyes. Oh, no, don't say nothing else to do, she said. What is horrible in a trouble of this kind is that one cannot, as in any other, in loss, in death, bear one's trouble in peace, but that one must act, said he, as though guessing her thought. One must get out of the humiliating position in which one is placed. One can't live à trois. Oh, I understand. I quite understand that, said Dolly, and her head sank. She was silent for a little, thinking of herself, of her own grief in her family, and all at once, with an impulsive movement, she raised her head and clasped her hands with an imploring gesture. But wait a little. You are a Christian. Think of her. What will become of her if you cast her off? I have thought, Darya Alexandrovna. I have thought a great deal, said Alexey Alexandrovitch. His face turned red in patches, and his dim eyes looked straight before him. Darya Alexandrovna at that moment pitied him. with all her heart. That is what I did indeed, when she made herself when she herself made known to me my humiliation. I felt everything as of old. I gave her a chance to reform. I tried to save her, and with what result? She would not regard the slightest request that she should observe decorum, he said, getting heated. One may save anyone who does not want to be ruined, but if the whole nature is so corrupt, so depraved, that ruin itself seems to be her salvation, what's to be done? Anything, only not divorce, answered Darya Alexandrovna. But what is anything? No, it is awful. She will be no one's wife. She will be lost. What can I do? Said Alexey Alexandrovitch, raising his shoulders and his eyebrows. The recollection of his wife's last act had so incensed him that he had become frigid, as at the beginning of the conversation. I am very grateful for your sympathy, but I must be going, he said, getting up. No, wait a minute. You must not ruin her. Wait a minute. I will tell you about myself. I was married, and my husband deceived me. In anger and jealousy, I would have thrown up everything. I would myself. But I came to myself again. And who did it? Anna saved me. And here I am living on. The children are growing up. My husband has come back to his family and feels his fault. He is growing purer, better, and I live on. I have forgiven it, and you ought to forgive. Alexey Alexandrovitch heard her, but her words had no effect on him now. All the hatred of that day when he had resolved on a divorce had sprung up again in his soul. He shook himself and said in a shrill, loud voice, "Forgive I cannot and do not wish to, and I regard it as wrong. I have done everything for this woman, and she has trodden it all in the mud to which she is akin. I am not a spiteful man. I have never hated anyone, but I hate her with my whole soul, and I cannot even forgive her because I hate her too much for all the wrong she has done me," he said, with tones of hatred in his voice. "Love those that hate you," Darya Alexandrovna whispered timorously. Alexey Alexandrovitch smiled contemptuously. That he knew long ago, but it could not be applied to this case. Love those that hate you, but to love those one hates is impossible. Forgive me for having troubled you. Everyone has enough to bear in his own grief. And regaining his self-possession, Alexey Alexandrovitch quietly took leave and went away. End of chapter 12. All right, so one of the reasons why Stepan Arkadyevich invited Alexei to this dinner was specifically to talk to Darya, so that Alexei wouldn't do rash decisions like getting a divorce. And so we have finally come to this moment where Darya, aka Dolly, is able to talk to Alexei. And she doesn't believe that Anna has done anything wrong because Anna is wonderful. Anna helped her through a hard time. And Alexei is like, okay, but she literally told me that she was doing wrong and then kept doing wrong. So I'm gonna do the extreme. Yeah. And Daria is like, okay, okay. Let me tell you my tale. And then talks about how she was cheated on and how Anna helped her through that, and now she is forgiven, and now Stepan is like part of the life again, part of the family again, and he has faced up to his fault and has felt all of the grief with everything like that, and they are able to move on. And Alexia is like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna forgive her. I am not a spiteful person, but I hate Anna. And Daria is like, love those who you hate. And Alexia is like, no, no, I hate her. He's like, I need to go. And that's where that chapter ended. Chapter 13. When they rose from table, Levin would have liked to follow Kitty into the drawing room, but he was afraid she might dislike this, as too obviously paying her attention. He remained in the little ring of men, taking part in the general conversation, and without looking at Kitty, he was aware of her movements, her looks, and the place where she was in the drawing room. He did at once, and without the smallest effort, keep the promise he had made her, always to think well of all men and to like everyone always. The conversation fell on the village commune, in which Pestsov saw a sort of special principle called by him the oral principle. Levin did not agree with Pestsov, nor with his brother, who had a special attitude of his own, both admitting and not admitting the significance of the Russian commune. But he talked to them, simply trying to reconcile and soften their differences. He was not in the least interested in what he said himself, and even less so in what they said. All he wanted was that they and everyone should be happy and contented. He knew now the one thing of importance, and that one thing was at first there, in the drawing room, and then began moving across and came to a standstill at the door. Without turning round, he felt the eyes fixed on him, and the smile, and he could not help turning round. She was standing in the doorway with Shtcherbatskoy, looking at him. "I thought you were going towards the piano," said he, going up to her. "That's something I miss in the country. Music." "No, we only came to fetch you and thank you," she said, rewarding him with a smile that was like a gift. "For coming. What do they want to argue for? No one ever convinces anyone, you know?" "Yes, that's true," said Levin. "It generally happens that one argues warmly simply because one can't make out what one's opponent wants to prove." Levin had often noticed in discussions between the most intelligent people that after enormous efforts and an enormous expenditure of logical subtleties and words, the disputants finally arrived at being aware that what they had so long been struggling to prove to one another had long ago, from the beginning of the argument, been known to both, but that they liked different things and would not define what they liked for fear of its being attacked. He had often had the experience of suddenly in a discussion grasping what it was his opponent liked and at once liking it too, and immediately he found himself agreeing. And then all arguments fell away as useless. Sometimes, too, he had experienced the opposite, expressing at last what he liked himself, which he was devising arguments to defend, and chancing to express it well and genuinely, he had found his opponent at once agreeing and ceasing to dispute his position. He tried to say this. She knitted her brow, trying to understand, but directly he began to illustrate his meaning, she understood at once. "I know. One must find out what he is arguing for, what is precious to him, then one can—" She had completely guessed and expressed his badly expressed idea. Levin smiled joyfully. He was struck by this transition from the confused, verbose discussion with Pestsov and his brother to this laconic, clear, almost wordless communication of the most complex ideas. Shtcherbatskoy moved away from them, and Kitty, going up to a card table, sat down and, taking up the chalk, began drawing diverging circles over the new green cloth. They began again on the subject that had been started at dinner, the liberty and occupations of women. Levin was of the opinion of Darya Alexandrovna, that a girl who did not marry should find a woman's duties in a family. He supported this view by the fact that no family can get on without women to help. that in every family, poor or rich, there are and must be nurses, neither relations or hired, or either relations or hired. No, said Kitty, blushing, but looking at him all the more boldly with her truthful eyes. A girl may be so circumstanced that she cannot live in the family without humiliation, while she herself— At the hint, he understood her. Oh, yes, he said. Yes, 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 you are right. You're right. And he saw all that Pestsov had been maintaining at dinner of the liberty of woman, simply from getting a glimpse of the terror of an old maid's existence and its humiliation in Kitty's heart. And loving her, he felt that terror and humiliation, and at once gave up his arguments. A silence followed. She was still drawing with the chalk on the table. Her eyes were shining with a soft light. Under the influence of her mood, she felt in all his being a continually growing tension of happiness. I've scribbled all over the table, she said, and laying down the chalk, she made a movement as though to get up. What? Shall I be left alone without her? He thought with horror, and he took the chalk. Wait a minute, he said, sitting down to the table. I've long wanted to ask you one thing. He looked straight into her caressing, though frightened eyes. Please ask it. Here, he said, and he wrote the initial letters W, Y, T, M, I, C, N, B, D, P, M, N, O, T. These letters meant, when you told me I could never be, what did that mean never, or then? There seemed no likelihood that she could make out this complicated sentence, but he looked at her as though his life depended on her understanding the words. She glanced at him seriously, then leaned her puckered brow on her hands and began to read. Once or twice she stole a look at him, as though asking him, Is it what I think? I understand, she said, flushing a little. What is this word? He said, pointing to the N that stood for never. It means never, she said. But that's not true. He quickly rubbed out what he had written, gave her the chalk, and stood up. She wrote T, I, C, N, A, D. Dolly was completely comforted in the depression caused by her conversation with Alexei Alexandrovitch when she caught sight of the two figures. Kitty, with a chalk in her hand, with a shy and happy smile, looking upwards at Levin, and his handsome figure bending over the table with glowing eyes, fastened 1 minute on the table, and the next on her. He was suddenly radiant. He had understood. It meant, then I could not answer differently. He glanced at her questioningly, timidly. Only then? Yes, her smile answered. And now? He asked. Well, read this. I'll tell you what I should like. Should like so much. She wrote the initial letters. I, Y, C, F, A, F, W, H. This meant, if you could forget and forgive what happened. He snatched the chalk with nervous, trembling fingers, and breaking it, wrote the initial letters of the following phrase. I have nothing to forget and to forgive. I have never ceased to love you. She glanced at him with a smile that did not waver. I understand, she said in a whisper. He sat down and wrote a long phrase. She understood it all, and without asking him, Is it this? Took the chalk and at once answered. For a long while he could not understand what she had written, and often looked into her eyes. He was stupefied with happiness. He could not supply the word she had meant, but in her charming eyes, beaming with happiness, he saw all he needed to know. And he wrote 3 letters. but he had hardly finished writing when she read them over her arm and herself finished and wrote the answer, yes. You're playing secretaire, said the old prince. But we must really be getting along if you want to be in time at the theater. Levin got up and escorted Kitty to the door. In their conversation, everything had been said. It had been said that she loved him, and that she would tell her father and mother that he would come tomorrow morning. End of chapter 13. All right. Okay, so we're back with Kitty and Levin, and Kitty gets up to go to the piano, and and Levin is like, oh, I don't want to seem like I'm too into her, so I'm gonna get up and go to the man circle. So he goes up and goes over to the man circle, and then he notices that Kitty has like followed him, and it's like, what you doing? And she's like, oh, and then she sits down and she's like drawing in chalk, and she's about to get up and leave, and Levin is like, no, please don't do that. Sit down. And so they're starting to communicate by only writing out the first letter of the word that they are saying. And they just magically know what the other person is saying. Which maybe I am just a simple little buffoon, but I would never know what. Let's see, what is the first one? I don't even know. It's not the first one, but IYCFAFWH. No, not in a million years. And also, like, there was never any like actual confirmation of what they were saying. They were just like, "Oh, I understand," and they would write something out. It's like, "Oh, I understand," and then they would just keep going. It's like, okay, but like, did you guys just like order fried chicken? Like, what are you saying? Do you know what you're saying? Apparently, they do. That's fine. Chapter 14. When Kitty had gone, and Levin was left alone, he felt such uneasiness without her, and such an impatient longing to get as quickly as possible to tomorrow morning, when he would see her again and be plighted to her forever, that he felt afraid, as though of death, of those 14 hours that he had to get through without her. It was essential for him to be with someone to talk to, so as not to be left alone, to kill time. Stepan Arkadyevitch would have been the companion most congenial to him, but he was going out, he said, to a soirée, in reality to the ballet. Levin only had time to tell him he was happy, and that he loved him, and would never, never forget what he had done for him. The eyes and the smile of Stepan Arkadyevitch showed Levin that he comprehended that feeling fittingly. "Oh, so it's not time to die yet?" said Stepan Arkadyevitch, pressing Levin's hand with emotion. "No," said Levin. Darya Alexandrovna, too, as she said goodbye to him, gave him a sort of congratulation, saying, "How glad I am you have met Kitty again. One more value, old friend." Levin did not like these words of Darya Alexandrovna's. She could not understand how lofty and beyond her it all was, and she ought not to have dared to allude to it. Levin said good-bye to them, but, not to be left alone, he attached himself to his brother. "Where are you going?" "I'm going... I'm going to a meeting." "Well, I'll come with you, may I?" "What for?" "Yes, come along," said Sergey Ivanovitch, smiling. "What is the matter with you today?" "With me? Happiness is the matter with me," said Levin, letting down the window of the carriage they were driving in. "You don't mind? It's so stifling. It's happiness in the matter with me. Why is it you have never married?" Sergey Ivanovitch smiled. "I am very glad. She seems a nice..." Sergey Ivanovitch was beginning. "Don't say it! Don't say it!" shouted Levin, clutching at the collar of his fur coat with both hands, and muffling him up in it. "She's a nice girl. We're such simple, humble words, so out of harmony with his feelings. Sergei Ivanovich laughed outright, a merry laugh, which was rare for him. Well, anyway, I may say that I'm very glad of it. That you may do tomorrow. Tomorrow and nothing more. Nothing more. Silence, said Levin, and muffling him once more in his fur coat, he added, I do like you so. Well, is it possible for me to be present at the meeting? Of course it is. What is your discussion about today? Asked Levin, never ceasing smiling. They arrived at the meeting. Levin heard Levin heard the secretary hastily read the minutes, which he obviously did not himself understand. But Levin saw from his secretary's face what a good, nice, kind-hearted person he was. This was evident from his confusion and embarrassment in reading the minutes. Then the discussion began. They were disputing about the misappropriation of certain sums and the laying of certain pipes, and Sergei Ivanovich was very cutting to two members, and said something at great length with an air of triumph, and another member, scribbling something on a bit of paper, began timidly at first, but afterwards answered him very viciously and delightfully. And then Zviazhsky, he was there too, said something too, very handsomely and nobly. Levin listened to them and saw clearly that these missing sums and these pipes were not anything real, and that they were not at all angry, but were all the nicest, kindest people, and everything was as happy and charming as possible among them. They did no harm to anyone, and were all enjoying it. What struck Levin was that he could not see through them all today, and from little, almost imperceptible signs knew the soul of each, and was distinctly that they were all good at heart. And Levin himself, in particular, they were all extremely fond of that day. That was evident from the way they spoke to him, from the friendly, affectionate way even those he did not know looked at him. Well, did you like it? Sergei Ivanovich asked him. Very much. I never supposed it was so interesting. Capital. Splendid. Zviazhsky went up to Levin and invited him to come round to tea with him. Levin was utterly at a loss to comprehend or recall what it was he had disliked in Zviazhsky, what he had failed to find in him. He was a clever and wonderfully good-hearted man. Most delighted, he said, and asked after his wife and sister-in-law. And from an odd association of ideas, because in his imagination the idea of Zviazhsky's sister-in-law was connected with marriage, it occurred to him that there was no one to whom he could more suitably speak of his happiness, and he was very glad to go and see them. Zviazhsky questioned him about his improvements on his estate, presupposing, as he always did, that there was no possibility of doing anything not done already in Europe, and now this did not in the least annoy Levin. On the contrary, he felt that Zviazhsky was right, that the whole business was of little value, and he saw the wonderful softness and consideration with which Zviazhsky avoided fully expressing his correct view. The ladies of the Zviazhsky household were particularly delightful. It seemed to Levin that they knew all about it already and sympathized with him, saying nothing merely from delicacy. He stayed with them an hour, 2, 3, talking of all sorts of subjects, but the one thing that filled his heart, and did not observe that he was boring them dreadfully, and that it was long past their bedtime. Zviazhsky went with him into the hall, yawning, and wondering at the strange humor his friend was in. It was past 1 o'clock. Levin went back to his hotel, and was dismayed at the thought that all alone now with his impatience, he had 10 hours still left to get through. The servant, whose turn it was to be up all night, lighted his candles, and would have gone away, but Levin stopped him. His servant, Igor, whom Levin had noticed before, struck him as a very intelligent, excellent, and, above all, good-hearted man. "Well, Igor, it's hard work not sleeping, isn't it?" "One's got to put up with it. It's part of our work, you see. In a gentleman's house it's easier, but then here one makes more." It appeared to Igor had a family, 3 boys and a daughter, a sempstress whom he wanted to marry to a cashier in a saddler's shop. Levin, on hearing this, informed Yegor that, in his opinion, in marriage the great thing was love, and that with love one would always be happy, for happiness rests only on oneself. Yegor listened attentively, and obviously quite took in Levin's idea, but by way of assent to it, he enunciated greatly to Levin's surprise the observation that when he had lived with good masters, he had always been satisfied with his masters, and now was perfectly satisfied with his employer, though he was a Frenchman. Wonderfully good-hearted fellow, thought Levin. Well, but yourself, Igor, when you got married, did you love your wife? Aye, and why not? Responded Yegor. And Levin saw that Yegor, too, was in an excited state and intending to express all his most heartfelt emotions. My life, too, has been a wonderful one. From a child up. He was beginning with flashing eyes, apparently catching Levin's enthusiasm, just as people catch yawning. But at that moment a ring was heard. Yegor departed, and Levin was left alone. He had eaten scarcely anything at dinner, had refused tea and supper at Zviashki's, but he was incapable of thinking of supper. He had not slept the previous night, but was incapable of thinking of sleep either. His room was cold, but he was oppressed by heat. He opened both the movable panes in his window, and he sat down to the table opposite the open panes. Over the snow-covered roofs could be seen a decorated cross with chains, and above it the rising triangle of Charles's Wain with the yellowish light of Capella. He gazed at the cross, then at the stars, drank in the fresh, freezing air that flowed evenly into the room, and followed, as though in a dream, the images and memories that rose in his imagination. At 4 o'clock he heard steps in the passage, and peeped out at the door. It was the gambler, Myaskin, whom he knew, coming from the club. He walked gloomily, frowning and coughing. Poor unlucky fellow, thought Levin, and tears came into his eyes from love and pity for this man. He would have talked with him, and tried to comfort him, but remembering that he had nothing but his shirt on, he changed his mind and sat down again at the open pane to bathe in the cold air and gaze at the exquisite lines of the cross, silent but full of meaning for him, and the mounting lurid yellow star. At 7 o'clock there was a noise of people polishing the floors and bells ringing in some servants' department, and Levin felt that he was beginning to get frozen. He closed the pane, washed, dressed, and went out into the street. End of chapter 14. Okay, chapter 14, we have the end of the party. So Kitty has left. She's very excited because Levin is going to come over tomorrow morning. And Levin is just on like cloud 9. He has confirmation through their little messages that he is going to come over tomorrow morning and re-propose. And she's going to say yes this time. That's what he has read into those messages. So now he is just so excited. And he just is on top of the world. He's just having a great time. And so he doesn't really want to go to bed yet because he just wants to figure out the fastest way to get it to be morning. And so his brother Sergei Ivanovich is about to head out, and he's like, let me come with you. He's like, all right. So Levin is joining him. He doesn't really understand quite what's going on, but he enjoys it. He's like, this is great. And so then he goes home, and the servant that is there is lighting the candles, and he's about to leave, and Levin is like, no, like, stay. Like, I want the company. Let's converse. And so uh, Levin has hit on personal life from the servant, and the servant's eyes just like light up, and he's so excited to talk about his children and his marriage and all of these things. And Levin is like, oh, perfect. He understands how happy marriage can be. This is the person I want to talk to. My brother doesn't know because he's never been married, but this guy, he knows where it's at. And that's kind of where we left off, was with him talking to him. Yeah. And now he's just like gazing outside. Chapter 15. The streets were still empty. Levin went to the house of the Sherbatskoys. The visitors' doors were closed and everything was asleep. He walked back, went into his room again, and asked for coffee. The day servant, not Igor, this time, brought it to him. Levin would have entered into conversation with him, but a bell rang for the servant, and he went out. Levin tried to drink coffee and put some roll in his mouth, but this mouth was quite at a loss what to do with the roll. Levin, rejecting the roll, put on his coat and went out again for a walk. It was 9 o'clock when he reached the Sherbatskoys' steps the second time. In the house, they were only just up, and the cook came out to go marketing. He had to get through at least 2 hours more. All that night and morning, Levin lived perfectly unconsciously and felt perfectly lifted out of the conditions of material life. He had eaten nothing for a whole day. He had not slept for 2 nights, had spent several hours undressed in the frozen air, and felt not simply fresher and stronger than ever, but felt utterly independent of his body. He moved without muscular effort, and felt as if he could do anything. He was convinced he could fly upwards or lift the corner of the house, if need be. He spent the remainder of the time in the street, incessantly looking at his watch and gazing about him. All that night and morning, Levin lived perfectly unconsciously and felt perfectly lifted out of the conditions of material life. He had eaten nothing for a whole day. He had not slept for 2 nights, had spent several hours undressed in the frozen air, and felt not simply fresher and stronger than ever, but felt utterly independent of his body. He moved without muscular effort, and felt as if he could do anything. He was convinced he could fly upwards or lift the corner of the house if need be. He spent the remainder of the time in the street, incessantly looking at his watch and gazing about him. And what he saw then, he never saw again after. The children especially going to school, the bluish doves flying down from the roofs on the pavement, and the little loaves covered the flour, thrust out by an unseen hand, touched him. Those loaves, those doves, and those 2 boys were not earthly creatures. It all happened at the same time. A boy ran towards a dove and glanced smiling at Levin. The dove, with a whir of her wings, darted away, flashing in the sun amid grains of snow that quivered in the air, while from a little window there came a smell of fresh baked bread, and the loaves were put out. All of this together was so extraordinarily nice that Levin laughed and cried with delight. Going a long way round by Gazetny Place and Kislovka, he went back again to the hotel, and putting his watch before him, he sat down to wait for 12 o'clock. In the next room, they were talking about some sort of machines and swindling and coughing their morning coughs. They did not realize that the hand was near 12. The hand reached it. Levin went out onto the steps. The sledge drivers clearly knew all about it. They crowded round Levin with happy faces, quarreling among themselves and offering their services, trying not to offend the other sledge drivers and promising to drive with them, too. Levin took one and told him to drive to the Sherbatskoys. The sledge driver was splendid in a white shirt collar sticking out over his overcoat and into his strong, full-blooded red neck. The sledge was high and comfortable, and altogether such a one as Levin never drove in after. And the horse was a good one, and tried to gallop, but didn't seem to move. The driver knew the Sherbatskoys' house, and drove up at the entrance with a curve of his arm and a whoa, especially indicative of respect for his fare. The Sherbatskoys' hall porter certainly knew all about it. This was evident from the smile in his eyes, and the way he said, "Well, it's a long while since you've been to see us, Konstantin Dmitrievitch." Not only he knew all about it, but he was unmistakably delighted and making effort to conceal his joy. Looking into his kindly old eyes, Levin realized even something new in his happiness. "Are they up? Pray, walk in. Leave it here," said he, smiling, as Levin would have come back to take his hat. That meant something. "To whom shall I announce your honor?" asked the footman. The footman, though a young man and one of the new school of footmen, a dandy, was a very kind-hearted, good fellow, and he, too, knew all about it. "The princess, the prince, the young princess," said Levin. The first person he saw was Mademoiselle Linen. She walked across the room, and her ringlets and her face were beaming. He had only just spoken to her when suddenly he heard the rustle of a skirt at the door, and Mademoiselle Linen vanished from Levin's eyes, and a joyful terror came over him at the nearness of his happiness. Mademoiselle Linen was in great haste, and leaving him, went out at the other door. Directly she had gone out, swift, light steps sounded on the parquet, and his bliss, his life, himself, what was best in himself, what he had so long sought and longed for, was quickly, so quickly, approaching him. He did not walk, but seemed, by some unseen force, to float to him. He saw nothing but her clear, truthful eyes, frightened by the same bliss of love that flooded his heart. Those eyes were shining nearer and nearer, blinding him with their light of love. She stopped still close to him, touching him. Her hand rose and dropped onto his shoulder. She had done all she could. She had run up to him and given herself up entirely, shy and happy. He put his arms round her and pressed his lips to her mouth that sought his kiss. She, too, had not slept all night, and had been expecting him all the morning. Her mother and father had consented without demur, and were happy in her happiness. She had been waiting for him. She wanted to be the first to tell him her happiness and his. She had got ready to see him alone, and had been delighted at the idea, and had been shy and ashamed, and did not know herself what she was doing. She had heard his steps and voice, and had waited at the door for Mademoiselle Linen to go. Mademoiselle Linen had gone away. Without thinking, without asking herself how and what, she had gone up to him, and did as she was doing. "Let us go to Mamma," she said, taking him by the hand. For a long while he could say nothing, not so much because he was afraid of desecrating the loftiness of his emotion by a word, as that every time he tried to say something, instead of words, he felt that tears of happiness were welling up. He took her hand and kissed it. "Can it be true?" he said at last in a choked voice. "I can't believe you love me, dear." She smiled at that "dear," and at the timidity with which he glanced at her. "Yes," she said significantly, deliberately. I am so happy." Not letting go his hands, she went into the drawing room. The princess, seeing them, breathed quickly and immediately began to cry, and then immediately began to laugh, and with a vigorous step Levin had not expected, ran up to him and hugged his head, kissed him, wetting his cheeks with her tears. "So it is all settled. I'm so glad. Love her. I am glad, Cleety. You've "You've not been long settling things," said the old prince, trying to seem unmoved, but Levin noticed that his eyes were wet when he turned to him. "I've long, always wished for this," said the prince, taking Levin by the arm and drawing him towards himself. "Even when this little featherhead fancied—" "Papa!" shrieked Kitty, and shut his mouth with her hands. "Well, I won't," he said. "I'm very, very what a fool I am." He embraced Kitty, kissed her face, her hand, her face again, and made the sign of the cross over her. And there came over Levin a new feeling of love for this man, till then so little known to him, when he saw how slowly and tenderly Kitty kissed his muscular hand. End of chapter 15. Okay, chapter 15. It's morning time, and Levin is like, hi ho diggity, let's do this. So he gets ready, he's all excited, he's just like singing with the birds, is what I'm imagining. He's just a joyful little friend. And so he goes to the Shabbatskoys and he's like, let's do this. And so he's greeted by the footman. The footman knows, he can tell because of that little smile that he has, and he's like, who should I call? He's like, obviously you need to call the prince, the princess, the young princess. I need a priest, an old priest and a young priest. And so he goes in there and he's just like, oh, here we go. But he's a little scared now, not because of like what's gonna happen, but because of how excited he is. So he goes there. He sees Mademoiselle Linen and he's like, it's happening. Mademoiselle Linen guides him into the room. Kitty's there. She is just a joyful burst of sunshine. And as soon as Mademoiselle Linen leaves, Kitty sprints over to Levin and is like, I am just so happy. Let's go get Mama. And Levin is like stumbling over his words. He can't really say anything because he's just so excited and just bursting at the seams with joy. And so they go see Mama and Papa, Princess and Prince Shabbatskoy, and they are just happy. They're just overjoyed. Everybody's just so happy that this is happening. And it's just so different from the last time that Levin proposed, which was dread on everybody's part. It was just dread because the princess did not want Kitty to marry him because she wanted her daughter Kitty to marry Vronsky because he was the smart match. And Levin was just a country bumpkin out on a farm. And that obviously did not work. And the prince is like, I just want my daughter to be taken care of. Doesn't matter. And so like now like that's happening. So everybody's just a bundle of joy. When we were getting to the part where it's well, like, let's go tell Mama, I was like, do they like it's never really been said explicitly. Like the proposal has not explicitly been said. Are they agreeing? Is Levin agreeing to something that he doesn't know? But no, that's not what happened. That's not what happened at all. Chapter 16. The princess sat in her armchair, silent and smiling. The prince sat down beside her. Kitty stood by her father's chair, still holding his hand. All were silent. The princess was the first to put everything into words, and to translate all thoughts and feelings into practical questions. And all equally felt this strange and painful for the first minute. When is it to be? We must have the benediction and announcement. And when's the wedding to be? What do you think, Alexander? Here he is, said the old prince, pointing to Levin. He's the principal person in the matter. When? Said Levin, blushing. Oh, tomorrow, if you ask me. I should say the benediction today and the wedding tomorrow. Come, monsieur, that's nonsense. Well, in a week. Oh, he's quite mad. No, why so? Well, upon my word, said the mother, smiling, delighted at this haste. How about the trousseau? Will there really be a trousseau and all that? Levin thought with horror. But can the trousseau and the benediction and all that, can it spoil my happiness? Nothing can spoil it. He glanced at Kitty, and noticed that she was not in the least, not in the very least, disturbed by the idea of the trousseau. Well, it must be all right, he thought. Oh, I know nothing about it. I only said what I should like, he said apologetically. Well, we'll talk it over then. The benediction and announcement can take place now. That's very well. The princess went up to her husband, kissed him, and would have gone away, but he kept her, embraced her, and, tenderly as a young lover, kissed her several times, smiling. The old people were obviously muddled for a moment, and did not quite know whether it was they who were in love again, or their daughter. When the prince and the princess had gone, Levin went up to his betrothed and took her hand. He was self-possessed now and could speak, and he had a great deal he wanted to tell her, but he said not at all what he had to say. How I knew it would be so. I never hoped for it, and yet my heart I was sure, always sure, he said. I believed that it was ordained. And I, she said, even when... She stopped, and went on again, looking at him resolutely with her truthful eyes. Even when I thrust from me my happiness, I always loved you alone. But I was carried away. I ought to tell you. Can you forgive that? Perhaps it was for the best. You will have to forgive me so much. I ought to tell you. This was one of the things he had meant to speak about. He had resolved from the first to tell her two things: that he was not chaste as she was, and that he was not a believer. It was agonizing, but he considered he ought to tell her both these facts. No, not now. Later, he said. Well, very well, later. But you must certainly tell me. I'm not afraid of anything. I want to know everything. Now it is settled, he added. Settled that you'll take me, whatever I may be. You won't give me up, yes? Yes, yes. Their conversation was interrupted by Mademoiselle Linon, who, with an affected but tender smile, came to congratulate her favorite pupil. Before she had gone, the servants came in with their congratulations. Then relations arrived, and there began that state of blissful absurdity from which Levin did not emerge till the day after his wedding. Levin was in a continual state of awkwardness and discomfort, but the intensity of his happiness went on all the while increasing. He felt continually that a great deal was being expected of him. What, he did not know. And he did everything he was told, and it all gave him happiness. He had thought that his engagement would have nothing about it like others, that the ordinary conditions of engaged couples would spoil his special happiness, but it ended in his doing exactly as other people did, and his happiness being only increased thereby, and becoming more and more special, more and more unlike anything that had ever happened. Now, we shall have sweetmeats to eat, said Mademoiselle Linon, and Levin drove off to buy sweetmeats. Well, I'm very glad, said Sviashki. I advise you to get the bouquets from Fomin's. Oh, are they wanted? And he drove to Fomin's. His brother offered to lend him money, as he would have so many expenses, presents to give. Oh, our presence wanted. And he galloped to Folds. And at the confectioner's, and at Foeman's, and at Fold's, he saw that he was expected, that they were pleased to see him, and prided themselves on his happiness, just as everyone whom he had to do with during those days. What was extraordinary was that everyone not only liked him, but even people previously unsympathetic, cold, and callous were enthusiastic over him, gave way to him in everything, treated him, treated his feeling with tenderness and delicacy, and shared his conviction that he was the happiest man in the world because his betrothed was beyond perfection. Kitty, too, felt the same thing. When Countess Nordston ventured to hint that she had hoped for something better, Kitty was so angry, and proved so conclusively that nothing in the world could be better than Levin, that Countess Nordston had to admit it, and in Kitty's presence never met Levin without a smile of ecstatic admiration. The confession he had promised was the one painful incident of his time. He consulted the old prince, and with his sanction gave Kitty his diary, in which there was written the confession that tortured him. He had written this diary at the time with a view to his future wife. Two things caused him anguish: his lack of purity and his lack of faith. His confession of unbelief passed unnoticed. She was religious, had never doubted the truth of religion, but his external unbelief did not affect her in the least. Through love she knew all his soul, and in his soul she saw that what she wanted, and that such a state of soul should be called unbelieving was to her a matter of no account. The other confession set her weeping bitterly. Levin, not without an inner struggle, handed her his diary. He knew that between him and her there could not be, and should not be, secrets, and so he had decided that so it must be. But he had not realized what an effect it would have on her. He had not put himself in her place. It was only when the same evening he came to her house before the theater, went into her room and saw her tear-stained, pitiful, sweet face, miserable with suffering he had caused and nothing could undo. He felt the abyss that separated his shameful past from her dove-like purity, and was appalled at what he had done. "Take them. Take these dreadful books," she said, pushing away the notebooks lying before her on the table. "Why did you give them to me? No, it was better, anyway," she added, touched by his despairing face. "But it's awful, awful." His head sank, and she was silent. He could say nothing. "You can't forgive me," he whispered. "Yes, I forgive you. But it's terrible." But his confession was so immense that this confession did not shatter it. It only added another shade to it. She forgave him. But from that time more than ever he considered himself unworthy of her, morally bowed down lower than ever before her, and prized more highly than ever his underserved happiness. End of chapter 16. Okay, so everyone's all excited. Arrangements are being made. Yada, yada, yada. But Levin is like, okay, Kitty, there's like two things I have to tell you. And she's like, oh, okay, like, what is it? It must be important. And he's like, okay, but like, you promise you're still gonna love me, right? Like, nothing's gonna change, like, we're getting married. And she's like, no, of course not, like, I love you, blah, blah, blah. And so the two things that he has to tell her, he tells her through diary entries. He, like, gives her journals that he wrote when he was, like, in a despairing time. So he gives them to her, and she finds out that, one, he's unreligious, which she has decided is like a non-issue, because even though he's not super religious, like, she's religious enough for the both of them, and she has seen his character and can see his soul and that he's a good person. Fine. Number two, though, she can't what she's having a harder time with, and that is that not he did not save himself for marriage. He is sullied. So she's having, yes, she's forgiven him, but it's a terrible thing that he has done. He is a heathen. And so now he's walking away from this knowing that, or feeling that he will always be below her. He is always going to be unworthy of her, and he is just always going to be, you know, a heathen. And they're not even married, and already I'm feeling the marital tension. Also, why is this not something, if it's something that is so important for both of them to know, like why isn't it something that he told her before the proposal? I don't understand. I don't know. He was being called out because, or like somebody else's story of like adultery and a duel happened, which I think is so funny that that's brought up once again because Alexei thought that there was to be a duel and Vronsky thought that there was to be a duel. And now that this has been brought up and Alexei and Vronsky had not had a duel, it's like, ooh, ooh. If I had a necktie, I would be doing my Dangerfield impression, but whatever. All right. Chapter 17. Unconsciously going over in his memory the conversation that had taken place during and after dinner, Alexey Alexandrovitch returned to his solitary room. Darya Alexandrovna's words about forgiveness had aroused in him nothing but annoyance. The applicability or non-applicability of the Christian precept to his own case was too difficult a question to be discussed lightly, and this question had long ago been answered by Alexey Alexandrovitch in the negative. Of all that had been said, what stuck most in his memory was the phrase of stupid, good-natured Turasin. Acted like a man he did, called him out, and shot him. Everyone had apparently shared this feeling, though from politeness they had not expressed it. But the matter is settled. It's useless thinking about it, Alexey Alexandrovitch told himself, and thinking of nothing but the journey before him, and the revision work he had to do, he went into his room and asked the porter who escorted him where his man was. The porter said that the man had only just gone out. Alexey Alexandrovitch ordered tea to be sent him. He sat down to the table and, taking the guidebook, began considering the route of his journey. 2 telegrams, said his manservant, coming into the room. I beg your pardon, your excellency, I only just that minute gone out. Alexey Alexandrovitch took the telegrams and opened them. The first telegram was the announcement of Stremov's appointment to the very post Karenina had coveted. Alexey Alexandrovitch flung the telegram down, and flushing a little, got up and began to pace up and down the room. Que vous perdre de mon temps, he said, meaning by que the persons responsible for his appointment. He was not so much annoyed that he had not received the post, that he had been conspicuously passed over, but it was incomprehensible, amazing to him, that they did not see that the wordy phrasemonger Stremov was the last man fit for it. How could they fail to see how they were ruining themselves, lowering their prestige by this appointment? Something else in the same line, he said to himself bitterly, opening the second telegram. The telegram was from his wife. Her name, written in blue pencil, Anna, was the first thing that caught his eye. I am dying. I beg, I implore you to come. I shall die easier with your forgiveness, he read. He smiled contemptuously and flung down the telegram. That this was a trick and a fraud, of that, he thought for the first minute, there could be no doubt. There is no deceit she would stick at. She was near her confinement. Perhaps it is the confinement. But what can be their aim? To legitimize the child? To compromise me? To prevent the divorce? He thought. But something was said in it. I am dying. He read the telegram again, and suddenly the plain meaning of what was said in it struck him. And if it is true, he said to himself, if it is true that in the moment of agony and nearness to death she is genuinely penitent, and I, taking it for a trick, refuse to go, that would not only be cruel and everyone would blame me, but it would be stupid on my part. Pyotr, call a coach. I am going to Petersburg, he said to his servant. Alexei Alexandrovitch decided that he would go to Petersburg and see his wife. If her illness was a trick, he would say nothing and go away again. If she was really in danger and wished to see him before her death, he would forgive her if he found her alive, and pay her the last duties if he came too late. All the way he thought no more of what he ought to do. With a sense of weariness and uncleanness from the night spent in the train, in the early fog of Petersburg, Alexei Alexandrovitch drove through the deserted Nevsky and stared straight before him, not thinking of what was awaiting him. He could not think about it, because in picturing what would happen, he could not drive away the reflection that her death would at once remove all the difficulty of his position. Bakers, closed shops, night cabmen, porters sweeping the pavements flashed past his eyes, and he watched it all, trying to smother the thought of what was awaiting him, and what he dared not hope for, and yet was hoping for. He drove up to the steps. A sledge and a carriage with the coachman asleep stood at the entrance. As he went into the entry, Alexei Alexandrovitch, as it were, got out his resolution from the remotest corner of his brain, and mastered it thoroughly. Its meaning ran, if it's a trick, then calm, contempt, and departure. If truth, do what is proper. The porter opened the door before Alexei Alexandrovitch rang. The porter, Kapitonich, looked odd in an old coat, without a tie, and in slippers. How is your mistress? A successful confinement yesterday. Alexei Alexandrovitch stopped short and turned white. He felt distinctly now how intensely he had longed for her death. And how is she? Corny, in his mourning apron, ran downstairs. Very ill, he answered. There was a consultation today, and the doctor's here now. Take my things, said Alexei Alexandrovitch, and feeling some relief at the news that there was still hope of her death, he went into the hall. On the hat stand there was a military overcoat. Alexei Alexandrovitch noticed it and asked, "Who is here?" "The doctor, the midwife, and Count Vronsky." Alexei Alexandrovitch went into the inner rooms. In the drawing-room there was no one. At the sound of his steps there came out of her boudoir, the midwife in a cap with lilac ribbons. She went up to Alexei Alexandrovitch, and with the familiarity given by the approach of death, took him by the arm and drew him towards the bedroom. "Oh, thank God you've come. She keeps on about you, and nothing but you," she said. "Make haste with the ice," the doctor's peremptory voice said from the bedroom. Alexei Alexandrovitch went into her room. At the table, sitting sideways in a low chair, was Vronsky, his face hidden in his hands, weeping. He jumped up at the doctor's voice, took his hands from his face, and saw Alexei Alexandrovitch. Seeing the husband, he was so overwhelmed that he sat down again, drawing his head down to his shoulders, as if he wanted to disappear. But he made an effort over himself, got up and said, "She is dying. The doctors say there is no hope. I am entirely in your power. Only let me be here. Though I am at your disposal, Alexey Alexandrovitch, seeing Vronsky's tears, felt a rush of that nervous emotion, always produced in him by the sight of other people's suffering, and turning away his face, he moved hurriedly to the door, without hearing the rest of his words. From the bedroom came the sound of Anna's voice saying something. Her voice was lively, eager, with exceedingly distinct intonations. Alexey Alexandrovitch went into the bedroom, and went up to the bed. She was lying turned with her face towards him. Her cheeks were flushed crimson, her eyes glittered. Her little white hands, thrust out from the sleeves of her dressing gown, were playing with the quilt, twisting it about. It seemed as though she were not only well and blooming, but in the happiest frame of mind. She was talking rapidly, musically, and with exceptionally correct articulation and expressive intonation. For Alexey. I am speaking of Alexey Alexandrovitch. What a strange and awful thing that both are Alexey, isn't it? Alexey would not refuse me. I should forget. He would forgive. But why doesn't he come? He's so good he doesn't know himself how good he is. Oh my God, what agony. Give me some water, quick. Oh, that will be bad for her, my little girl. Very well, then. Give her to a nurse. Yes, I agree. It's better, in fact. He'll be coming. It will hurt him to see her. Give her to the nurse. Anna Arkadyevna, he has come. Here he is, said the midwife, trying to attract her attention to Alexey Alexandrovitch. Oh, what nonsense, Anna went on, not seeing her husband. No, give her to me. Give me my little one. He has not come yet. You say he won't forgive me because you don't know him. No one knows him. I'm the only one, and it was hard for me even. His eyes I ought to know. Seroisa has just the same eyes, and I can't bear to see them because of it. Has Seroisa had his dinner? I know everyone will forget him. He would not forget. Seroisa must be moved into the corner room, and Mariette must be asked to sleep with him. All of a sudden, she shrank back, was silent, and in terror, as though expecting a blow, as though to defend herself, she raised her hands to her face. She had seen her husband. No, no, she began. I am not afraid of him. I am afraid of death. Alexey, come here. I am in a hurry, because I've no time. I've not long left to live. The fever will begin directly, and I shall understand nothing more. Now I understand. I understand it all. I see it all. Alexey Alexandrovitch's wrinkled face wore an expression of agony. He took her by the hand and tried to say something, but he could not utter it. His lower lip quivered, but he still went on struggling with his emotion, and only now and then glanced at her. And each time he glanced at her, he saw her eyes gazing at him with such passionate and triumphant tenderness as he had never seen in them. Wait a minute. You don't know. Stay a little. Stay. She stopped, as though collecting her ideas. Yes, she began. Yes, this is what I wanted to say. Don't be surprised at me. I'm still the same. But there is another woman in me. I'm afraid of her. She loved that man, and I tried to hate you, and could not forget about her that used to be. I'm not that woman. Now I'm my real self, all myself. I'm dying now. I know I shall die. Ask him. Even now I feel. See here, the weights on my feet, on my hands, on my fingers. My fingers, how huge they are. But this will soon be over. Only one thing I want. Forgive me. Forgive me quite. I'm terrible. But my nurse used to tell me, the holy martyr, what was her name? She was worse. And I'll go to Rome. There's a wilderness, and there I shall be no trouble to anyone, only I'll take Siroisa and the little one. No, you can't forgive me. I know it can't be forgiven. No, no, go away, you're too good. She held her hands in one burning hand, while she pushed him away with the other. The nervous agitation of Alexei Alexandrovitch kept increasing, and had by now reached such a point that he ceased to struggle with it. He suddenly felt that what he had regarded as nervous agitation was, on the contrary, a blissful, spiritual condition that gave him all at once a new happiness he had never known. He did not think that the Christian law that he had been all his life trying to follow enjoined on him to forgive and love his enemies. But a glad feeling of love and forgiveness for his enemies filled his heart. He knelt down, and laying his head in the curve of her arm, which burned him as with fire through the sleeve, he sobbed like a little child. She put her arm around his head, moved towards him, and with defiant pride lifted up her eyes. That he is. I knew him. Now, forgive me. Everyone, forgive me. They've come again. Why don't they go away? Oh, take these cloaks off me. The doctor unloosed her hands, carefully laying her on the pillow, and covered her up to the shoulders. She lay back submissively, and looked before her with beaming eyes. Remember one thing, that I needed nothing but forgiveness, and I want nothing more. Why doesn't he come? She said, turning to the door towards Vronsky. Do come, do come. Give me your hand. Vronsky came to the side of the bed, and, seeing Anna again, hid his face in her hands. Uncover your face. Look at him. He's a saint, she said. Oh, uncover your face. Do uncover it, she said angrily. Alexei Alexandrovitch, do uncover his face. I want to see him. Alexei Alexandrovitch took Vronsky's hands and drew them away from his face, which was awful, with the expression of agony and shame upon it. Give him your hand. Forgive him. Alexei Alexandrovitch gave him his hand, not attempting to restrain the tears that streamed from his eyes. Oh, thank God. Oh, thank God, she said. Now everything is ready. Only to stretch my legs a little. There, that's capital. How badly these flowers are done. Not a bit like a violet, she said, pointing to the hangings. My God, when will it end? Give me some morphine. Doctor, give me some morphine. Oh, my God. And she tossed about on the bed. The doctors said that it was puerperal fever, and that it was 99 chances in 100 it would end in death. The whole day long there was fever, delirium, and unconsciousness. At midnight the patient lay without consciousness and almost without pulse. The end was expected every minute. Vronsky had gone home, but in the morning he came to inquire, and Alexei Alexandrovitch, meeting him in the hall, said, "Better stay. She might ask for you," and himself led him to his wife's room. Towards morning there was a return again of excitement, rapid thought and talk, and again it ended in unconsciousness. On the third day it was the same thing, and the doctors said there was hope. That day Alexei Alexandrovitch went into the room where Vronsky was sitting, and closing the door sat down opposite him. "Alexei Alexandrovitch," said Vronsky, feeling that a statement of the position was coming, "I can speak. I can't understand. Spare me. However hard it is for you, believe me, it is more terrible for me." He would have risen, but Alexei Alexandrovitch took him by the hand and said, I beg you to hear me out. It is necessary. I must explain my feelings, the feelings that have guided me and will guide me, so that you may not be in error regarding me. You know I had resolved on a divorce, and had even begun to take proceedings. I won't conceal from you that in beginning this I was in uncertainty. I was in misery. I will confess that I was pursued by a desire to revenge myself on you and on her. When I got the telegram, I came here with the same feelings. I will say more. I longed for her death, but... He paused, pondering whether to disclose or not to disclose his feelings to him. But I saw her, and forgave her, and the happiness of forgiveness has revealed to me my duty. I forgave completely. I would offer the other cheek. I would give my cloak if my coat be taken. I pray to God only not to take from me the bliss of forgiveness. Tears stood in his eyes, and the luminous, serene look in them impressed Vronsky. This is my position. You can trample me in the mud, make me the laughing stock of the world. I will not abandon her, and I will never utter a word of reproach to you, Alexey Alexandrovitch went on. My duty is clearly marked for me. I ought to be with her, and I will be. If she wishes to see you, I will let you know, but now I suppose it would be better for you to go away. He got up, and sobs cut short his words. Vronsky, too, was getting up, and in stooping, not yet erect posture, looked up at him from under his brows. He did not understand Alexey Alexandrovitch's feelings, but he felt that it was something higher and even unattainable for him with his view of life. End of chapter 17. Okay, chapter 17 is dramatic. Drama! Okay, so Alexei gets two letters. One basically saying that he has been passed by for a promotion or for a position that he wanted. And two is from Anna, saying that she is dying and needs to see him and is begging for his forgiveness. And so Alexei immediately is like, okay, let's go. So he goes on his way to Petersburg, and on his journey he has decided that if this is a ruse and a lie, terrible things will happen. If it is not, and she is dying, he will indeed forgive her. If it is not, and she has already died, he will pay his respects. By terrible things will happen, I mean he will not say anything and will just leave. And probably continue on with like this weird little thing that's going on between them. But he goes there and she is in fact dying. The doctor's there, the midwife's there. She has given birth. She will be giving birth to a daughter. I don't fully know if the baby has been born or not. But Vronsky is also there, and Anna is like in a delirious state, probably from the fever, from the puerperal fever, and she is just asking for forgiveness from Alexei, and also for Alexei and Vronsky to forgive each other. It does happen, and yeah, Alexei has just decided, like, okay, this is where I need to be. This is my part. This is my role that I need to play. And he tells Vronsky this. He's like, I need to be here. I am going to stay with my wife. If she wants to see you, I will let you know. But you need to leave. Ooh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. We'll do one more. One more chapter. Chapter 18. After the conversation with Alexey Alexandrovitch, Vronsky went out onto the steps of the Karenin's house and stood still, with difficulty remembering where he was and where he ought to walk or drive. He felt disgraced. humiliated, guilty, and deprived of all possibility of washing away his humiliation. He felt thrust out of the beaten track along which he had so proudly and lightly walked till then. All the habits and rules of his life that had seemed so firm had turned out suddenly false and inapplicable. The betrayed husband who had figured till that time as a pitiful creature, an incidental and somewhat ludicrous obstacle to his happiness, had suddenly been summoned by her herself, elevated to an awe-inspiring pinnacle, and on the pinnacle that husband had shown himself, not malignant, not false, not ludicrous, but kind and straightforward and large. Vronsky could not but feel this, and the parts were suddenly reversed. Vronsky felt his elevation and his own abasement, his truth and his own falsehood. He felt that the husband was magnanimous even in his sorrow, while he had been base and petty in his deceit. But this sense of his own humiliation before the man he had unjustly despised made up only a small part of his misery. He felt unutterably wretched now, for his passion for Anna, which had seemed to him of late to be growing cooler, now that he knew he had lost her forever, was stronger than ever it had been. He had seen all of her in her illness, had come to know her very soul, and it seemed to him that he had never loved her till then. And now, when he had learned to know her, to love her as she should be loved, he had been humiliated before her, and had lost her forever, leaving with her nothing of himself but a shameful memory. Most terrible of all had been his ludicrous, shameful position when Alexey Alexandrovitch had pulled his hands away from his humiliated face. He stood on the steps of the Karenins' house like one distraught, and did not know what to do. "A sledge, sir?" asked the porter. "Yes, a sledge." On getting home after 3 sleepless nights, Vronsky, without undressing, lay down flat on the sofa, clasping his hands and laying his head on them. His head was heavy. Images, memories, and ideas of the strangest description followed one another with ordinary rapidity and vividness. First, it was the medicine he had poured out for the patient and spilt over the spoon, then the midwife's white hands, then the odd posture of Alexey Alexandrovitch on the floor beside the bed. To sleep, to forget, he said to himself, with the serene confidence of a healthy man, that if he is tired and sleepy, he will go to sleep at once. And the same instant his head did begin to feel drowsy, and he began to drop off into forgetfulness. The waves of the sea of unconsciousness had begun to meet over his head. When all at once, it was as though a violent shock of electricity had passed over him. He started so that he leaped up on the springs of the sofa, and leaning on his arms, got in a panic onto his knees. His eyes were wide open, as though he had never been asleep. The heaviness in his head and the weariness in his limbs that he had felt a minute before had suddenly gone. "You may trample me in the mud," he heard Alexey Alexandrovitch's words, and saw him standing before him, and saw Anna's face with its burning flush and glittering eyes, gazing with love and tenderness, not at him, but at Alexey Alexandrovitch. He saw his own, as he fancied, foolish and ludicrous figure when Alexey Alexandrovitch took his hands away from his face. He stretched out his legs again and flung himself on the sofa in the same position and shut his eyes. "To sleep, to forget," he repeated to himself. But with his eyes shut, he saw more distinctly than ever Anna's face as it had been on the memorable evening before the races. This is not and will not be, and she wants to wipe it out of her memory. How I cannot live without it. How can we be reconciled? How can we be reconciled? He said aloud, and unconsciously began to repeat these words. This repetition checked the rising up of fresh images and memories, which he felt were thronging in his brain. But repeating words did not check his imagination for long. Again, in extraordinarily rapid succession, his best moments rose before his mind, and then his recent humiliation. Take away his hands, and his voice said. He takes away his hands and feels the shame-struck and idiotic expression of his face. He lay still down. He still lay down, trying to sleep, though he felt there was not the smallest hope of it, and kept repeating stray words from some chain of thought, trying by this to check the rising flood of fresh images. He listened, and heard in a strange, mad whisper words repeated. I did not appreciate it, did not make enough of it. I did not appreciate it, did not make enough of it. What's this? Am I going out of my mind? He said to himself. Perhaps. What makes men go out of their minds? What makes men shoot themselves? He answered himself, and opening his eyes he saw with wonder an embroidered cushion beside him, worked by Varya, his brother's wife. He touched the tassel of the cushion and tried to think of Varya, of when he had seen her last, but to think of anything extraneous was an agonizing effort. No, I must sleep. He moved the cushion up and pressed his head into it, but he had to make an effort to keep his eyes shut. He jumped up and sat down. That's all over for me, he said to himself. I must think what to do. What is left? His mind rapidly ran through his life apart from his love of Anna. Ambition? Supohovskoy? Society? The court? He could not come to a pause anywhere. All of it had had meaning before, but now there was no reality in it. He got up from the sofa, took off his coat, undid his belt, and uncovering his hairy chest to breathe more freely, walked up and down the room. This is how people go mad, he repeated, and how they shoot themselves, to escape humiliation, he added slowly. He went to the door and closed it. Then with fixed eyes and clenched teeth, he went up to the table, took a revolver, looked around him, turned it to a loaded barrel, and sank into thought. For 2 minutes his head bent forward with an expression of an intense effort of thought. He stood with the revolver in his hand, motionless, thinking. Of course, he said to himself, as though a logical, continuous, and clear chain of reasoning had brought him to an indubitable conclusion. In reality, this, of course, that seemed convincing to him was simply the result of exactly the same circle of memories and images through which he had passed 10 times already during the last hour, memories of happiness lost forever. There was the same conception of the senselessness of everything to come in life, the same consciousness of humiliation. Even the sequence of these images and emotions was the same. Of course, he repeated, when for the 3rd time his thought passed again round the same spellbound circle of memories and images, and pulling the revolver to the left side of his chest and clutching it vigorously with his whole hand, as it were, squeezing it in his fist, he pulled the trigger. He did not hear the sound of the shot, but a violent blow on his chest sent him reeling. He tried to clutch at the edge of the table, dropped the revolver, staggered, and sat down on the ground, looking about him in astonishment. He did not recognize his room. Looked up from the ground, at the bent legs of the table, at the waste-paper basket, and the tiger-skin rug. The hurried, creaking steps of his servant coming through the drawing-room brought him to his senses. He made an effort at thought, and was aware that he was on the floor, and seeing blood on the tiger-skin rug and on his arm. He knew he had shot himself. Idiotic. Missed, he said, fumbling after the revolver. The revolver was close beside him. He sought further off, still feeling for it. He stretched out to the other side, and not being strong enough to keep his balance, fell over, streaming with blood. The elegant, whiskered manservant, who used to be continually complaining to his acquaintances of the delicacy of his nerves, was so panic-stricken on seeing his master lying on the floor that he left him losing blood while he ran for assistance. An hour later, Varia, his brother's wife, had arrived, and with the assistance of 3 doctors whom she had sent for in all directions, and who all appeared at the same moment, she got the wounded man to bed, and remained to nurse him. End of chapter 18. Okay. Okay, so we're following Vronsky, and he is recalling the night, and how he no longer has the heart of Anna, and realized it when Alexei Alexandrovich was there. Uh-oh. And so he's like, I have nothing. I am feeling worse than Alexei has ever felt. The only thing that I could possibly do is end everything. That is what I need to do. And he just keeps repeating how he wants to go to sleep, and how if only he could. And so he's at home, and he finds a revolver, and he pulls the trigger, and he misses. He shoots his arm instead. And so he's laying back on the ground. Blood is just streaming from his arm. It's, staining the carpet, the tiger skin carpet. And he sees his manservant come in, and his manservant is just absolutely shocked. Has never imagined anything like this would happen before. And so he runs out and gets Varia, who is Vronsky's brother's sister, so his sister-in-law, and or Vronsky's brother's wife, his sister-in-law, and she sends out for doctors. The doctors all come at the same time, and so he is saved and is being mended. But not how I thought that this was going to go, especially with the talk of the duels. But also at the same time, like anytime we had a talk about the duels, somebody was injured, not necessarily killed. Maybe, yeah, but injury was also there. And also aiming wide was mentioned many times. So interesting that this is how it is played out. And what a chapter to end on for tonight. uh, but yeah, that's gonna be where we end today. We've passed the 50% mark. We did it. We did it. We did it. We did it. So exciting. I am really enjoying this story so much. And it seems like every time we read, I think I know what's going to happen. And then it's like the drama is like, girl, no, you don't. And then it just like wiggles its little way in. Okay, so thank you. It was a pleasure, as always. Whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you. And I 1000% appreciate your support. If I don't see you next time, I hope to see you very soon. Bye.